From the outside, my life probably looks like something out of a magazine. I'm Detective Jack Carter, one of the most decorated investigators in the New York Metropolitan Police Department. People call me relentless, a bloodhound when it comes to chasing down criminals. My career has made headlines, even landed me in the New Yorker. My wife, Samantha, is a socialite, the kind of woman who commands attention in a room without trying. We live in a beautiful townhouse in Upper Manhattan with our 2 kids, Emma, who's 16 and impossible to figure out lately, and Ryan, my 11-year-old shadow. But lately, my perfect life feels more like a facade. Something's off, and no amount of gut instinct or detective work can fix it. Not yet. Anyway, it's Samantha. She's always been dazzling. Flawless hair, sharp wit, a knack for getting people to hang on her every word. That's how she hooked me all those years ago, back when I was just a rookie detective, and she was the belle of every charity gala. I remember thinking she was too good for me, a cop from Brooklyn with nothing to offer but ambition. Lately, though, I can't shake the feeling that something's changed. She's distant, distracted, and then there are the things. The Hermes handbag that appeared out of nowhere, perched on the kitchen counter like a trophy. A week before, it was the diamond bracelet on her wrist, sparkling under the dining room chandelier. Before that, the Mercedes. "It's just a lease," she'd said, brushing it off like it was no big deal. But we don't live in that league. Sure, we're comfortable, but I don't make Hermes money, not even close. The kids are their own kind of puzzle. Emma's going through a rebellious phase so intense I don't know whether to laugh or lock her in her room until she's 30. Tonight, she's upstairs blasting some pop anthem that makes the walls vibrate. Ryan, on the other hand, is in his room with the door slightly open, hunched over one of his Lego sets. That boy. He's so much like me, quiet and always watching, soaking in the details no one else sees. Dinner's almost ready. I call up the stairs, knowing full well no one's listening. Downstairs, Samantha's in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. She's barely touched her pasta, just twirling it around her fork like it's a prop. Her diamond bracelet catches the light every time she moves. Emma stomps down, sits for about 2 minutes, then rolls her eyes and asks to be excused. Samantha mutters something about a headache and disappears upstairs with her wine glass. Ryan stays, finishing his meal like the good kid he is, but even he heads up early. And there I am, sitting alone at the table with cold pasta and 1,000 questions I don't want to ask. The next morning, I dive back into work. It's the only place where things still make sense. My current case is a monster, Victor Moretti, the kind of mob boss you see in movies, but hope to God you never meet in real life. Prohibited substances, weapons, human trafficking, you name it, Moretti's got his hands in it. My team's been chasing him for months, but the guy's slippery. He's always 2 steps ahead, like he's reading the playbook before we write it. By the time I leave the precinct, I'm wiped. But instead of heading straight home, I take a detour. Samantha mentioned a new yoga studio she joined in Midtown, and I can't get it out of my head. I park across the street, leaning back in my seat as I watch the front door. I tell myself I'm being paranoid, that she'll come out alone, and this whole thing will blow over. But she doesn't come out alone. It's her, all right, my wife, Samantha, walking out with some guy who looks like he just stepped out of a GQ photo shoot. Tall, tailored suit, perfectly styled hair. He's walking too close to her, leaning in when he talks, making her laugh. Then he opens the door to a black Escalade, his hand brushing the small of her back as she climbs in. My stomach tightens, but I don't move. I just sit there, gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. I could follow them. I could find out exactly where they're going and who this guy is. But something stops me. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's denial. Either way, I stay parked until the Escalade disappears down the street. When I get home, Samantha's already there, stretched out on the couch with a glass of wine in hand. She looks up as I walk in, giving me a smile that doesn't feel quite right. "You're home late," she says casually. "Yeah, busy day," I reply, keeping my voice even. "Everything okay?" she asks, tilting her head just slightly. I force a smile. "Of course." She nods and takes another sip of wine, her attention drifting back to the TV. I head upstairs, my mind still spinning. The guy from the yoga studio, the luxury gifts, the unexplained outings. The pieces don't fit, but my gut's telling me I'm close to something big. The problem is, this isn't just another case. This is my wife, my family. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not sure I want to know the truth. When I first became a detective, I learned quickly to trust my instincts. Gut feelings aren't admissible in court, but they've saved my life more than once. Lately, though, my gut's been telling me that the real case I need to crack isn't in the precinct. It's in my own house. It started with the little things. Samantha's explanations about her day didn't quite line up. Lunch with friends would stretch into hours, but when I asked who she met, she'd throw out vague names of women I'd never heard of. Her stories were smooth, too smooth. There was no hesitation, no pause to think, just rehearsed lines delivered with that easy charm of hers. One morning, I decided to test her. I casually asked which yoga class she was taking later, dropping the name of a made-up studio. Without missing a beat, she smiled and said, "That's the one." That's when I knew. She wasn't just lying. She was confident I wouldn't catch her. At work, Moretti was still my top priority. Surveillance footage came in daily, and I pored over it with my team, looking for any weakness in his network. His favorite haunt was the Avalon, a five-star hotel in Midtown where he conducted business meetings under the guise of private dinners. It was the kind of place where you didn't ask questions as long as the money flowed. That's where I saw her. It was late, past 10 p.m. I was reviewing grainy footage from a surveillance camera across the street. Moretti's Escalade pulled up to the hotel's private entrance. A few minutes later, a woman stepped out of the back seat and walked through the doors. Her stride, the way her coat swayed, it was unmistakable. Samantha. For a second, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was seeing what I feared, not what was real. But as I rewound the footage and zoomed in, my stomach turned. It was her. I knew the way she carried herself, the way she tilted her head just slightly when she walked. There was no mistaking it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Samantha was in bed next to me, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. My mind churned. What was she doing at the Avalon? Meeting Moretti? Why? I couldn't ask her outright. If she was hiding something, and at this point, I was sure she was, she'd lie, just like she always did. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. The next day, I started digging. At the precinct, I pulled up her financial records. I told myself I wasn't abusing my power. I was protecting my family. What I found made my blood run cold. In the past 6 months, her personal account had ballooned. There were deposits, big ones, totaling over $100,000. Where the hell was that money coming from? I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. We shared a joint account for household expenses, and I knew what we could afford. This wasn't income from some side hustle or inheritance. These were wire transfers from shell accounts, the kind I'd spent years tracing in money laundering investigations. That night, I sat in my car outside our townhouse, staring at the glowing windows. I didn't want to go inside. I didn't want to see her. Instead, I made a call. The private investigator was an old contact, someone I trusted. I explained the situation without naming names. "Follow her," I said. "Tell me where she goes, who she meets. I need photos. Everything." A week later, the PI handed me a folder. My hand shook as I opened it, and there it was, evidence I couldn't ignore. Pictures of Samantha and Moretti, together, at the Avalon, at a private dining room in some upscale restaurant, even walking along Fifth Avenue with shopping bags. In every shot, they looked close, too close. The kind of close that made my stomach churn and my chest ache. But that wasn't the worst of it. During a surveillance operation on Moretti's crew, we'd planted a series of bugs in key locations. One of them, a hidden microphone in the Avalon's private lounge, picked up a conversation that shattered what was left of my world. Samantha's voice. Clear as day. "I told you Jack's getting close," she said. "You need to move the shipments before he connects the dots. He's watching the Avalon, so use the drop at the docks instead." I froze as her words played through the speakers. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was feeding Moretti information. My information. My investigation. I don't remember much after that. I left the room, my head spinning, and ended up in my car. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the city lights through the windshield. Anger boiled in my chest, but beneath it was something worse: betrayal. The woman I'd loved, the mother of my children, had sold me out. I wanted to confront her, to yell, to demand answers, to make her explain why she'd done this to me. But I didn't. Instead, I made a decision. If Samantha and Moretti thought they could outsmart me, they were wrong. They'd underestimated me, and they were going to regret it. You can't fight betrayal with anger. You fight it with precision. That's what I kept telling myself as I started planning my next move. My emotions, hurt, rage, disbelief, were screaming for action, but my instincts told me to slow down, to be methodical. I'd been chasing Victor Moretti for years, and now, with Samantha's betrayal tangled up in it, this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was personal, but I couldn't do it alone. The first person I brought in was Lisa Monroe. Lisa's a genius when it comes to tech. If it has a signal, she can hack it, track it, or scramble it. She's been with the precinct for 6 years and has a no-nonsense attitude that makes her invaluable in high-stakes situations. Next was Sergeant Tom Harris, my partner since my rookie days. Tom's the kind of guy who'd take a bullet for you without hesitation. He's also one of the few people I'd trust with something this delicate. And finally, Claire Matthews, an assistant district attorney who's been itching to bring Moretti down for as long as I've been chasing him. Claire's sharp as hell, a pit bull in the courtroom, and willing to bend the rules just enough to get results. When I laid out the situation, I left out the personal details, at least at first. Moretti has a leak inside my house, I told them. I can't explain everything yet, but I need this to stay off the books. Tom frowned but didn't push. Lisa nodded, already scrolling through her tablet, and Claire leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What's the play?" she asked. The play was twofold: confirm Samantha's loyalty to Moretti and bait them into a trap they couldn't escape. I started by feeding Samantha small pieces of false information, little breadcrumbs about the Moretti investigation. One night, over dinner, I casually mentioned a major bust planned at the docks in Brooklyn. "I don't want to jinx it," I said, swirling my fork in my pasta, "but if this goes right, we'll have enough to put Moretti away for good." Samantha barely reacted, just gave me a distracted nod. But the next day, Lisa confirmed my suspicions. "Your wife made a call," she said, sliding her laptop across the desk to show me the intercepted audio. "Victor," Samantha's voice said, "Jack's planning something at the docks. You need to move the shipment." My chest tightened as I listened, but I forced myself to focus. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was evidence. The next step was staging the trap. Lisa, Tom, and I worked late nights crafting a fake prohibited substances shipment tied to Moretti. It had to be believable, real enough to lure him in, but not so risky that we'd lose control of the operation. Lisa fabricated shipping manifests and text communications between fictional players in Moretti's organization, planting the bait where Samantha would find it. Once the plan was in motion, we turned our attention to surveillance. We needed Samantha and Moretti on tape. Lisa set up a series of hidden cameras and listening devices, focusing on places we knew they frequented: the Avalon's private lounge, Moretti's favorite restaurant, and a luxury condo he owned downtown. The bugs were small, impossible to detect, and linked directly to Lisa's encrypted server. Meanwhile, I played my role perfectly. At home, I acted as though nothing had changed. I smiled through dinners, helped Ryan with his homework, even listened to Emma complain about school without letting the storm brewing inside me show. Samantha was so convinced she had the upper hand that she didn't notice the subtle shifts in my behavior. The way I asked more questions about her day, the way I stayed up late, working on my laptop while secretly monitoring her movements. The night of the operation, everything came to a head. Samantha had slipped out, claiming she was meeting a friend for drinks. I tracked her to the condo, where Moretti was waiting. "Let's see what they're up to," Lisa said, her voice steady as she adjusted the audio feed. Through the hidden mic, I heard Samantha's voice, low and serious. "Jack's been busy. He thinks he's got you cornered with this shipment." Moretti laughed. "Let him think that. By the time his guys hit the docks, we'll be halfway to the Bahamas." "That's not all," Samantha added, her tone shifting to something almost proud. He left his case files out the other night. I got pictures of everything, witness lists, warrants, the whole deal. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. That was it. The confirmation I needed. Lisa hit record, saving the entire exchange. By the time the night was over, we had hours of audio and video tying Samantha and Moretti to conspiracy, obstruction, and more. This is airtight, Claire said the next morning as we reviewed the evidence. Her tone was professional, but I caught the flicker of concern in her eyes when she glanced at me. Jack, this isn't just a case for you anymore. Are you sure you can handle this? I didn't answer right away. My mind was already racing ahead, thinking of how to use this to take Moretti down for good. Samantha's betrayal was personal, yes, but I couldn't afford to let my emotions cloud the endgame. This isn't about me, I said finally. This is about justice. And I meant it. At least, I wanted to. But as we began planning the next steps, I couldn't shake the image of Samantha's face when she finally realized I knew everything. I always thought betrayal had a limit, that there was a point where someone you loved would stop themselves from going too far. But as I dug deeper into Samantha's connection to Moretti, I realized how wrong I was. Her betrayal wasn't just personal. It was systemic. The first clue came from Lisa. We've been tracking Moretti's money trails, she told me one night at the precinct, her eyes glued to her laptop screen. And guess whose social circle keeps popping up in the transactions? I leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the spreadsheet she'd pulled up. Names scrolled by, prominent women from Samantha's charity circuit, socialites, and wives of CEOs. Are you saying she's helping him launder money? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Lisa nodded. She's been introducing Moretti to people who can move his money through legit channels. Charity donations, art auctions, even real estate deals. Your wife isn't just leaking intel, Jack. She's a damn accomplice. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I'd suspected Samantha was in deep, but this? Actively aiding a criminal empire? Meanwhile, our investigation into Moretti's operations uncovered something even darker. He wasn't just dealing prohibited substances or running illegal weapons. He was involved in human trafficking. Claire called me into her office to break the news. They're smuggling people and shipping containers, she said, her voice heavy. Young women, mostly. They promise them jobs or safety, then sell them off like cattle. My fists clenched at my sides. This wasn't just about taking Moretti down anymore. This was about stopping something vile, something inhuman. Claire gave me a look, her usual sharpness softened by concern. Jack, I know this is personal for you, but you need to keep your head clear. We're dealing with monsters. I nodded, but inside, my anger was boiling over. Samantha knew who Moretti was, what he was capable of, and she still chose to help him. At home, things were falling apart faster than I could hold them together. Emma was the first to pick up on the tension. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen while I was washing dishes. Dad, she said, her arms crossed, her purple-streaked hair falling into her face. What's going on with Mom? I froze, the plate in my hand slipping under the soapy water. What do you mean? She's acting weird, Emma said bluntly. She's always on her phone. She disappears for hours and doesn't tell anyone where she's going. And don't even get me started on her new friends. She used air quotes, her teenage skepticism cutting straight through me. Your mom's just busy, I said weakly, knowing it wasn't enough. Emma raised an eyebrow. Busy doing what? I couldn't answer. Ryan, on the other hand, was quieter. Too quiet. He used to follow me around the house, asking questions about my day, my cases, my life. Now he barely said a word. One night, I found him sitting on the stairs, staring at the wall. Hey, buddy, I said, sitting down beside him. What's on your mind? He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Is it Mom and me? I asked gently. His lip trembled, and he nodded. My heart broke right there. Listen, Ryan. Sometimes grown-ups, they go through stuff. But none of this is your fault, okay? I promise you, no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. He leaned into me, and I wrapped my arm around his small shoulders. For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to him, but then he whispered, Are you and Mom getting a divorce? The question hit me like a gut punch. No, buddy. Nothing like that. I'm just trying to figure some things out. But as I sat there holding my son, I wasn't sure I believed my own words. The deeper I got into the investigation, the harder it became to keep my family from unraveling. Samantha, oblivious to how much I knew, continued her charade. She came home late, smelling of expensive perfume and wine, her excuses growing thinner by the day. One night, she tried to make small talk at dinner. "Emma, how's school?" Emma didn't even look up from her plate. "Fine. And Ryan?" Samantha pressed. "Did you finish your math project?" Ryan didn't answer. He just pushed his food around with his fork, avoiding her gaze. Samantha sighed dramatically. "Why is everyone so tense lately?" Emma snapped. "Maybe because you're never here." "Emma," I said sharply, but the damage was done. Samantha's face hardened. "You know what? I don't have to sit here and be attacked in my own home." She grabbed her wine glass and disappeared upstairs, leaving the rest of us in uncomfortable silence. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at the photos and audio files Lisa had compiled. Moretti's empire was sprawling, but with Samantha's help, I finally understood its inner workings. The web of betrayal was bigger than I'd ever imagined. Samantha wasn't just a pawn in Moretti's game. She was a willing participant, and I was done playing along. It was time to pull the trigger on the trap we'd set. I wasn't just going to bring Moretti down. I was going to take Samantha down with him. I'd spent years chasing criminals, learning their patterns, and anticipating their moves. But this time, the target wasn't just some mob boss or prohibited substances runner. This time, it was my wife. And the stakes were higher than ever, not just for me, but for my kids, my team, and the innocent lives trapped in Moretti's empire. Every move I made now had to be precise, deliberate. There was no room for error. The first step was planting trackers and bugs. Lisa helped me slip a GPS tracker into Samantha's car, disguised as part of her key fob. We also planted miniature listening devices in her purse, her favorite pair of sunglasses, and even her phone case. "She won't notice," Lisa assured me. "These are state-of-the-art. If she so much as whispers about Moretti, we'll hear it." Every morning, I reviewed the GPS logs and audio files while Samantha went about her day, oblivious. Her movements painted a clear picture. Late-night trips to Moretti's condo, secret meetings at upscale restaurants, and long drives out to the suburbs, where she connected with Moretti's clients. Meanwhile, Tom and Claire were working on flipping one of Moretti's men. His name was Alejandro Vega, a low-level enforcer who'd been picked up in a sting last month. Alejandro knew everything: shipment schedules, Moretti's offshore accounts, and, most importantly, the human trafficking routes. "Vega's scared," Claire told me. "He knows Moretti will kill him if he talks." "Then we make him feel safer with us than he does with Moretti," I replied. After hours of negotiation, Vega agreed to testify, giving us the last piece we needed to tie Moretti's operation together. The sting operation was set for the following week. It would be a public takedown, the kind you see splashed across the front page of every newspaper. The plan was simple on paper. Lure Moretti to a fake business meeting at one of his favorite restaurants, catch him red-handed with incriminating evidence, and arrest him on the spot. Samantha, of course, would be there, fully implicated in the scheme. As we finalized the details, I couldn't ignore the gnawing ache in my chest. This was justice, necessary, inevitable, but it still felt like ripping out a piece of myself. At home, Samantha was unraveling. She'd always been composed, her lies wrapped in charm and confidence. But now she was jittery, her smiles forced, her temper flaring at the smallest things. One night, as we sat in the living room, I noticed her glancing at her phone every few minutes. "You're on edge," I said casually. "Something going on?" She laughed, a brittle sound that made my skin crawl. "Work stuff," she said vaguely. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I pressed. Her eyes darted to mine, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face before she shrugged it off. "Just charity drama. Nothing important." But I knew better. The bugs confirmed my suspicions. Samantha was scrambling to cover her tracks, deleting emails, and making frantic calls to Moretti. "You need to calm down," Moretti's voice said in one recording. His tone was icy, controlled. If Carter finds out what you've done, it's over, for both of us. I'm doing my best, Samantha snapped. But he's been acting different. Watching me. Then get him off your back. Distract him. Do whatever you have to do. Her hesitation was audible, but eventually, she muttered, fine. The conversation sent a chill down my spine. Samantha wasn't just panicking. She was desperate, and desperation made people dangerous. The final straw came 2 days before the sting. Samantha confronted me in the kitchen, her expression a mix of anger and fear. Jack, she said, her voice sharp. What's going on with you? You've been distant, distracted. Is there someone else? The accusation hit like a slap, but I kept my face neutral. Someone else? I repeated. You think I'm cheating on you? Her eyes narrowed. I don't know what to think. You're hiding something. I leaned against the counter, folding my arms. Maybe you're projecting, Sam. You've been the one sneaking around, haven't you? Her face paled, but she recovered quickly, plastering on a defensive scowl. That's ridiculous. You're just paranoid because of your job. Maybe, I said, letting the silence stretch between us. Or maybe I'm seeing things a little clearer these days. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and stormed out of the room. That night, Lisa sent me another audio clip. Moretti was furious. She's losing it, he snarled. If she can't handle this, I'll cut her loose. You don't mean that, Samantha said, her voice trembling. I mean exactly that. If Carter gets too close, I'll do what I have to do to protect myself. And that includes you. I clenched my jaw as I listened. Moretti was ready to throw Samantha under the bus the moment she became a liability. And the irony? She didn't even realize I was about to do the same thing. The pieces were in place. The stage was set. This wasn't just about taking Moretti down anymore. It was about dismantling the entire web of lies and betrayal that had poisoned my life. Samantha had made her choices. Now, she'd have to face the consequences. If there's one thing Samantha always excelled at, it was putting on a show. Her charity gala, held at the historic Rosewood Hotel in Midtown, was her masterpiece, glitz, glamour, and an attendee list that read like a who's who of the city's elite. CEOs, politicians, and socialites sipped champagne under crystal chandeliers, their laughter echoing off the gilded walls. It was the perfect stage. My team and I arrived early, blending in with the catering staff and event security. Lisa was stationed in a utility closet, her laptop glowing as she monitored the feeds from hidden cameras we'd planted around the ballroom. Tom stood near the bar, dressed in a tuxedo that looked slightly out of place on his bulky frame. Claire was mingling with the guests, her practiced smile masking the intensity of what we were about to do. I stayed out of sight, watching from a corner as Samantha floated through the crowd in a floor-length red gown. She was radiant, her laugh melodic as she charmed donors and posed for photos. It was almost enough to make me forget what I knew. Almost. And then Moretti arrived. He walked in like he owned the place, his tailored suit immaculate, his signature smirk firmly in place. Samantha greeted him near the entrance, her hand resting lightly on his arm as she leaned in to speak. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The way she looked at him told me everything. Lisa's voice crackled through my earpiece. All systems go. The recording's queued up. On your signal. Stand by, I replied, my heart pounding. As the evening progressed, Samantha took the stage to deliver her speech. She thanked the attendees for their generosity, weaving in anecdotes about her dedication to making the world a better place. The hypocrisy was almost unbearable. I waited until she introduced Moretti as a major donor. The applause was polite but subdued. His reputation preceded him, even in these circles. Moretti stepped up to the podium, his charm on full display as he spoke about giving back and supporting the community. That's when I gave the signal. The room went dark. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the projector behind the stage lit up. Ladies and gentlemen, my voice echoed through the ballroom, amplified by the sound system. I apologize for the interruption, but it's time for a reality check. On the screen, a grainy video played. Samantha's voice came first, clear and unmistakable. I told you Jack's getting close. You need to move the shipments before he connects the dots. The footage shifted to a private meeting at Moretti's condo, with Samantha handing him a folder. "These are all his case files," she said. "Everything he knows about the operation." Murmurs erupted among the guests, quickly escalating to outright shock. Faces turned toward Samantha, who stood frozen on the stage, her eyes wide with panic. Moretti moved first, lunging toward the exit, but Tom and a squad of undercover officers blocked his path. "Victor Moretti," Tom said loudly, "you're under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, and human trafficking." Moretti's bravado cracked as officers cuffed him, his protests drowned out by the chaos in the room. Samantha, still on the stage, clutched the microphone like a lifeline. "Jack, please," she stammered, her voice trembling. "This is a mistake. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, stepping into the spotlight. My tone was cold, controlled. "Samantha Carter, you're under arrest for aiding and abetting a criminal enterprise, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy." The room went silent as officers approached her. She stumbled back, shaking her head. "You can't do this," she cried, her voice breaking. "I was doing it for us, for our family." "No," I said firmly, locking eyes with her. "You did this for yourself." As the cuffs clicked around her wrists, the weight of her choices finally seemed to hit her. She sagged against the officers, her tears streaking the makeup she'd so carefully applied. The gala descended into chaos as guests scrambled for the exits, their whispered conversations laced with disbelief and scandal. Samantha's socialite friends avoided her gaze, pretending not to see as she was led out alongside Moretti. Claire caught my arm as I watched them leave. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, but the truth was, I didn't know. By the time the ballroom cleared, it was just me and my team. Lisa packed up her gear, Tom patted me on the shoulder, and Claire gave me a faint smile before heading out. I stood there for a long time, staring at the now empty stage. The sting was over, the arrests made. Justice had been served. But as I walked out into the crisp night air, I couldn't shake the hollow ache in my chest. This wasn't just the end of a case. It was the end of a life I thought I understood, and the beginning of something new. The day after the sting, the house was unbearably quiet. It was a silence so thick it felt like a living thing, pressing against my chest, suffocating me. The kids were upstairs, hiding in their rooms, and I was in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. Samantha was gone, arrested, indicted, and transported to a holding facility downtown. Moretti was sitting in a federal detention center, and his empire was crumbling as more of his associates flipped for lighter sentences. On paper, I'd won. But sitting in that kitchen, all I felt was loss. Emma broke the silence first. She stormed downstairs, her hair tied back in a messy bun, eyes red from crying. "This is your fault," she yelled, slamming her hands on the kitchen table. I looked up at her, trying to steady my voice. "Emma, I know this is hard, but—" "You don't know anything," she snapped. "You humiliated Mom in front of everyone. You ruined her life, and now ours too. How am I supposed to go back to school after this? Everyone's going to know." Her words cut deep, but I kept my tone calm. "Emma, your mother made choices that hurt this family. I had to do what was right." "You didn't have to destroy her," she screamed before running back upstairs, slamming her door so hard the walls shook. I sank back into my chair, rubbing my temples. Emma had always been dramatic, but this wasn't just teenage angst. She was lashing out because her world had been ripped apart, and she didn't know how to handle it. Ryan was a different story. He barely spoke, his quiet demeanor now bordering on total withdrawal. That night, I found him sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. "Hey, buddy," I said, sitting next to him. "You okay?" He shrugged, his shoulders slumping even further. "You can talk to me," I said gently. "About anything. I'm here." He looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Why did Mom do it?" I swallowed hard, fighting the lump in my throat. "I don't know, Ryan. I wish I did. But what I do know is that I love you and Emma, and I'm going to do everything I can to make this right." He nodded but didn't say anything else. I stayed with him until he fell asleep, the weight of his heartbreak settling over me like a heavy blanket. The backlash came quickly. Samantha's parents, Her friends, even people I'd barely spoken to, were suddenly crawling out of the woodwork to accuse me of being vindictive. "She made a mistake, Jack," her mother said over the phone, her voice icy. "But you didn't have to destroy her. She's the mother of your children." "She's a criminal," I replied flatly. "And if you don't want to be next, I'd suggest you stop defending her." The line went dead. Samantha's social circle, always quick to rally behind their own, turned on me just as fast. At the grocery store, I caught whispers and sideways glances. At the kids' school, the other parents avoided me like I had a contagious disease. None of it mattered. What mattered were Emma and Ryan, and the fact that they were paying the price for their mother's choices. At work, it was a different story. Moretti's arrest had made headlines, and the department wasted no time capitalizing on the victory. "You did good, Jack," the captain said during the commendation ceremony. His words were gruff but genuine. "You took down one of the biggest crime syndicates this city's ever seen. That's no small thing." I nodded, accepting the plaque they handed me, but I couldn't bring myself to smile. Claire Matthews was relentless as ever, announcing at a press conference that she was pursuing additional charges against Moretti's associates. "This is just the beginning," she said. "We will dismantle every part of this operation and ensure that everyone involved is held accountable." She caught my eye after the event, giving me a small nod. "You did the right thing, Jack," she said softly, "even if it doesn't feel like it right now." Doing the right thing didn't feel like enough when I was at home, faced with the fallout. The kids were hurting, and I couldn't fix it alone. After a week of strained silences and shouting matches, I called a family therapist. The first session was brutal. Emma refused to talk, sitting with her arms crossed and glaring at me like I was the enemy. Ryan stayed silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I know this is hard," the therapist said gently, her voice calm and reassuring. "But healing takes time. You're all hurting in different ways, and that's okay. The important thing is that you're here, together." It was a start, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. At night, when the house was quiet and the kids were asleep, I sat in the living room, staring at old family photos. One of them was from a trip to the beach years ago. Samantha laughing as Emma buried Ryan in the sand, his little face peeking out with a grin. I didn't know who that woman was anymore, but I knew who I had to be now. A father who fought for his kids, no matter how broken the pieces of our family felt. Justice had been served. Now, I had to figure out how to rebuild what was left. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat in the courthouse parking lot, staring at the crisp legal papers on the passenger seat. It wasn't just an end. It was a strange, quiet beginning. The chapter with Samantha was officially closed. She'd taken a plea deal, trading a reduced sentence for cooperation against Moretti's associates. The deal was cold comfort, but it was one less burden to carry. What mattered now was Emma and Ryan. I made sure the custody arrangement left no room for ambiguity. The kids would stay with me. Samantha's lawyers had fought for shared custody, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The judge's ruling was swift, granting me full custody. It wasn't a victory I wanted to celebrate. At home, the air felt lighter, even as the scars of the past lingered. There were no more late-night calls, no hushed conversations in corners. It was just me, Emma, and Ryan. The three of us, trying to figure out how to be a family again. Around the same time, the department approached me with an offer I hadn't expected, leading a new specialized task force targeting organized crime. The irony wasn't lost on me. My greatest professional triumph had come at the cost of my family. But this was a chance to channel my pain into something meaningful. "You're the best we've got for this, Jack," the captain said, sliding the proposal across his desk. "You know how these guys operate. You've lived it." I took the offer. It wasn't about ambition anymore. It was about purpose. One of the first things I did was start mentoring younger detectives. Seeing them reminded me of my early days, back when I was still naive enough to believe the world was black and white. There was a rookie named Diaz who reminded me of myself, sharp, eager, but a little too quick to act on instinct. One evening, after a long day of briefing him on surveillance techniques, he asked, "How do you do it, Carter? Keep going after everything you've been through?" I thought about it for a moment, then replied, "You focus on what's worth fighting for." And you never let the bad stuff make you forget why you started in the first place. At home, things were beginning to shift. Emma still had her walls up, but they were starting to crack. One evening, I found her in the living room, scrolling through her phone while I cooked dinner. "Smells good," she said casually. I paused, surprised by the olive branch. "Thanks. It's your favorite, spaghetti carbonara." She looked up at me, her expression softer than it had been in months. "I know I've been difficult," she said hesitantly. I didn't know how to handle everything with Mom." I set the spatula down and sat across from her. "I get it, Emma. None of this has been easy, especially for you and Ryan. But I need you to know I'm here, no matter what." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know. I'm sorry, Dad." Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Ryan, meanwhile, had started opening up in his own way. One Saturday, while cleaning the garage, I found an old baseball glove tucked behind a pile of boxes. It was his, from when he'd played Little League. "Hey, Ryan," I called out, holding up the glove. "Remember this?" He wandered over, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I used to be terrible at catching. Want to give it another shot?" He hesitated, then nodded. We spent the afternoon tossing the ball back and forth in the yard, the sound of leather snapping against leather filling the air. For the first time in months, I saw him smile, a real, unguarded smile. As the weeks turned into months, the three of us found a new rhythm. Emma started spending less time locked in her room and more time at the dinner table, even joking with Ryan occasionally. Ryan began looking forward to our weekend baseball sessions, and I started looking forward to the quiet moments when it was just the three of us, laughing over a movie or arguing about what to order for dinner. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was ours. One evening, as I tucked Ryan into bed, he looked up at me and asked, "Are we going to be okay, Dad?" I ruffled his hair, smiling. "Yeah, buddy, we're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The past had left its scars, but it had also taught me how to fight for what mattered. Justice had been served. Now, it was time to rebuild. 1 year later, the courtroom was packed, buzzing with reporters and spectators as the judge delivered the sentence. Victor Moretti, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Samantha sat a few rows back, flanked by her attorney and the ever-present weight of her decisions. Her testimony against Moretti had been critical in securing his conviction, and the plea deal she'd struck reduced her sentence to 5 years. I hadn't seen her since the divorce, and though the bitterness of her betrayal lingered, I felt no satisfaction in watching her be led away. Her choices had hurt more than just me. They had hurt Emma, Ryan, and herself. But the weight of justice wasn't mine to carry anymore. I'd done my part, and the system had done its job. The following week, I found myself at City Hall, standing on a stage with the mayor and several of my colleagues. The ceremony was formal but heartfelt, honoring the task force that had dismantled one of the city's most dangerous crime syndicates. "Detective Jack Carter," the mayor said, gesturing toward me as the audience applauded. "A man who exemplifies courage, dedication, and integrity. His relentless pursuit of justice brought down a criminal empire and restored safety to our streets." I accepted the plaque they handed me, shaking the mayor's hand as camera flashes lit up the room. It was a proud moment, but what mattered most wasn't the applause or the recognition. It was knowing that Moretti's reign of terror was over. At home, life had found its rhythm again. Emma had joined her school's debate team, channeling her fiery personality into something constructive. She'd even brought home a first-place trophy from a regional competition, her grin wide as she showed it off. "Guess I got my argumentative streak from you," she joked one night, her tone teasing but affectionate. Ryan, meanwhile, had become a star on his middle school baseball team. Watching him pitch on weekends was the highlight of my week, especially when he ran off the field, beaming, to tell me how he'd struck someone out. "Good job, buddy," I'd say, ruffling his hair. "Keep it up." The kids were thriving, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. One quiet evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat on the porch, nursing a cup of coffee as the city buzzed softly in the distance. The stars were faint against the urban glow, but they were there, constant, steady. Betrayal had tested me in ways I never thought possible. It had shattered my family, threatened my career, and left scars that might never fully heal. But it had also forced me to look inward, to ask myself who I was and what I stood for. Justice wasn't just a job. It was a commitment, a promise to fight for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. I thought about Emma's fiery resilience and Ryan's quiet strength. I thought about the laughter that had returned to our house, the way the three of us had learned to lean on each other. We'd been through hell, but we'd come out stronger. As I sat there, the night stretching out before me, I felt a quiet sense of peace. The past was behind us, but the future? The future was ours. What would you do if someone you trusted most became your greatest betrayer? Could you remain focused on justice, or would the personal cost be too much to bear? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to subscribe to Cheating Storytelling so you never miss an update on more real-life stories. And as always, see you in the next video.